Hello, welcome to the Submarine Force Museum. I'm Commander Brad Boyd, Director of the Museum and Officer in Charge of Structure Ship Nautilus. Today we're going to be talking about the Mark 14 torpedo that you see behind me. Now the Mark 14 torpedo was designed in 1931 as a replacement for the Mark 10. It was the primary torpedo of use in World War II until the introduction of the Mark 18 electric torpedo. And actually with an upgrade that it received, because originally it could only be set mechanically, so you had to set it at the torpedo tube, what course and depth it was going to run on. And with the invention of new fire control systems that need to be done electronically, so they modified this torpedo and actually was able to see service all the way up to about 1980. 13,000 of these torpedoes were produced in World War II alone. And with that, I'm going to pause for a second. I'm going to get a closer look. All right, Mark 14 torpedo, 246 inches long, which is 20 feet 6 inches, 21-inch diameter, 3,200 pounds, and was driven by a wet heater combustion steam turbine, which we'll talk about that in a minute, don't worry. It was gyro guided, so it couldn't home on a target, but it could maintain a course. So if you set it on course due west, course 270, and something happened to drive it off that course, it will come back to 270. Now it doesn't compensate for set and drift. So if you're going against a current and it's pushing you off course, it's like walking on a treadmill in one direction and it's pushing you another direction. You're going to make a diagonal over ground. The torpedo can't compensate for that. It can't maintain a course over ground, but it can maintain a course through the water. But it did that by adjusting the rudder here, so that could actually be controlled internal to the torpedo to drive it back on course. And it actually also could control the stern planes to increase rise or dive on the stern planes and get it to its ordered depth to run at. It was able to travel at 31.1 knots at low speed or 46.3 knots at high speed, and it had a max range of 9,000 yards or 4,500 yards, 9,000 for low speed, 4,500 for high speed. Now, we're going to do some basic math here. So the low speed, let's just call it 30 knots to make the math easy. That means it's moving at 1,000 yards a minute. So if you're shooting at a contact 9,000 yards away and you're moving at 1,000 yards a minute, it's going to take 9 minutes for the torpedo to get there. A lot can change in 9 minutes, and so you can have a lot of air. Like the target could just turn, and there's nothing you can do about it. At 4,500 yards and at 46.3 knots, which we'll call 45 to make the math easy, that's 1,500 yards traveled per minute by the torpedo. So that's 3 minutes of travel to go 4,500 yards. Still a lot can happen in that time frame. Targets can turn, things can change. So most successful engagements, unless you're shooting against, say, an anchored ship in port, happened at less than 2,000 yards. In fact, most torpedo engagements that are successful happened at around the 800 to 1,500 yard mark. Some even closer than that, but then you can actually damage the ship with the shock wave going off, which has happened. Now, the Mark 14 torpedo, which we talked about being designed in 1931 for replacement of the Mark 10, it needed to happen because warships were starting to come up with ways to defend against the torpedo. They were making armor to resist torpedo impact, either a torpedo belt or blisters on the ship that would then intake the explosive power of the torpedo without actually damaging the pressure hull, not the pressure hull, the hull, so that they wouldn't be sinking as a result. So you could get around this by one of two ways. One, you could increase the warhead size, or two, you could design the torpedo to detonate under the target. So what that does is, by detonating under the target and not striking it, you create this air void, and now the water's been displaced and there's nothing holding the keel up, which is where all the weight of the ship rests. It's the backbone of the ship. And so with nothing supporting the keel will break, and that will actually cause the target to sink. So Mark 14 could do both. It had a magnetic influence detector to be able to drive the torpedo under the ship, detect that the ship's over it, and then tell it to detonate. Or it could just strike the ship with the contact detonator. The other thing it did was increase the warhead size. So the warhead on the Mark 10 was about 490 pounds. The warhead on the Mark 14, 643 pounds. So about a 150-pound increase. However, it also changed the detonating material. So the Mark 10 was just TNT, dynamite. The Mark 14 was a torpedo explosive, which in World War II, torpedo explosive just it just means the explosive used on a torpedo is nicknamed Torpex. Torpex in World War II is a different mixture than what we use at different points in history. In World War II, it was a mixture of TNT, powdered aluminum, and RDX, which was a oxygen, nitrogen, methylene compound. Now, by doing all this, the mixture created an explosive yield 50% greater than that of just TNT. So for every 10 pounds of TNT explosive, you would get the same mixture of Torpex. 10 pounds of Torpex would yield 15 pounds of explosive power of TNT. So the Mark 14, even though it only had 150 pounds more mass for the explosive, there's actually an extra 471 pounds of explosive yield. So that's the explosives. Now we're going to go to the engine. So as I said, the torpedo is a wet heater combustion engine. So this is a new design for the Navy. It was a combustion engine that burned ethanol and then used compressed air, which there'd be compressed air in this tank right here. So this section was basically the fuel section. And so you'd have compressed air, water, and ethanol stored in here. The ethanol came with the torpedo. The compressed air and water came from the ship. And the air would be pressed up to 2,800 pounds per square inch. Water would just fill. And then the air and the ethanol would go to the combustion chamber. And then the water would be used to cool the combustion chamber, which reduced the heat and therefore the thermal stress in the system, allowing a faster fuel burning rate. So you could burn the fuel faster, which obviously increases the propulsive yield and how quickly you can make the combustion happen, therefore how much you can drive the torpedo through the water. But the other added benefit to the water was when it turned to steam from cooling the combustion engine, that steam was then added to the exhaust gases and sent to the turbine that actually drove the ship forward, the torpedo forward. By doing this, you again increase the propulsive yield of the same amount of fuel and increase the speed by having the steam do extra work on the turbine. So the wet cool did two things: allowed a faster burn rate, and then also added that steam into the exhaust mix to the turbine, increasing the propulsive yield, driving the torpedo faster. So, all right, so this episode was just giving you a basis on this torpedo. In coming episodes, we'll go into more depth about the Mark 14. We'll talk about its creation, some of the development successes that it had, and notable, maybe better spoken as infamous failures. So I hope you enjoyed today's spotlight, but with that, thanks for coming.